Why does emotional healing fail when the body is left out? In today's video, I'm going to be explaining to you why emotional stress is stored physiologically. I'm also going to be covering how unresolved stress patterns live in your nervous system. I'll be discussing why your body must complete what stress interrupted, basically that emotional resolution, emotional healing, why your body must complete that, and what actually creates emotional resolution without reliving trauma. In the previous video, I talked about when stress shows up as physical symptoms. I also discussed psychosomatic symptoms, which is basically that mind body connection, and how physical symptoms can actually have an emotional component, and that physical symptoms are real. They're not just made up and in your head. That stress lives in the nervous system, and that insight alone doesn't always resolve your symptoms, and that the body responds when it feels safe. So, first of all, there's nothing wrong with you. Understanding your story doesn't mean that your body feels safe. Awareness alone doesn't calm the nervous system. It can bring a bit of calm or maybe even a tremendous amount of calm, having awareness, but that alone by itself doesn't actually bring resolution to your nervous system, which then invokes a lot of calm and groundedness. And so this is common, especially for high functioning people. In other words, people that have it all figured out and check all the boxes on their to-do list. And it seems like, okay, well, I've done all these things. Why am I still not feeling well? And then, question themselves like, is there something wrong with me? Am I doing something wrong here? So a key reframe is to notice, acknowledge, know that your emotions are physiological. They are tiny little information substances that are all throughout your body. So emotions are physiological. They're not this psychological phenomenon. And so the emotions begin in the body. The brain labels what the body experiences physiologically and sensations. And then healing must follow that same pathway. So emotions begin in the body, the brain labels what the body is experiencing, and then healing must follow that same pathway. This is why a lot of times people feel stuck when they talk about things, but they don't actually feel the relief in their body. So why does stress get stuck? Why does that even happen? Why does stress get stuck in your body? Stress interrupts natural completion in a nutshell. And so basically, there's a fight, flight, or freeze response. I'm sure you've heard of that before, right? When you experience stress, that's your body's natural reaction is to either fight something or, run away or freeze, right? And so resolution then doesn't finish when your body responds in that way, generally. And so when the body stays on alert, sometimes even years later, it can just continually have this heaviness within your system. And you might actually notice that you get triggered by seemingly insignificant things, which are actually not seemingly insignificant, but it might seem that way. And so some other factors might include just feeling unsafe. If you're, fighting an illness, whether it's just a common cold or something like the flu or something more serious, maybe a chronic condition that you might be having, or maybe you've had for a while, high stress levels, just low bandwidth in general, those are all things that factor into interrupting that stress completion cycle. So, for example, let me just give you an example of, let's say something stressful happens, you feel various different emotions that don't feel very good, right? Let's say you experience, let's just say something was like a betrayal, okay? And you feel betrayed, you feel super angry, you feel very disappointed, as an example. Those emotions might reside in your body for years to come, particularly if that situation happened when you were feeling under the weather. You already had a lot of stress on your plate. There were so many other things that all these different balls up in the air that you're trying to juggle and balance life, and you're already under a lot of stress. Perhaps you're in an unsafe environment or you feel like you're in an unsafe environment. All these different factors factor in to whether or not your body naturally resolves the emotional imprint when it responded to that situation. Because ideally, emotions are, they communicate to us, right? We have a certain kind of feeling about something, and it helps us to respond to our environment appropriately, right? And so all of these emotions are good and healthy. Even the difficult to feel emotions have their place. Imagine a world that nobody ever got angry, right? And you might be thinking, oh, well, that'd be kind of a nice place. Well, the problem is that how do we get into that like justice, right? Like fighting for justice, which is a good thing, right? We get angered by an injustice, and that propels us to take action against injustice, as an example, right? So all these different emotions that we experience are good and healthy in and of themselves, but when they're left unfinished, when there's like unfinished business and they just continually reside in the system and they don't actually get expressed constructively and move their way out of the system, they get stuck. And then the next day, the next month, the next year, the next decade, you might get triggered by something that kind of sort of resembles the original thing that responded or that, prompted that emotion in the first place. And then you get triggered. And so that there's a number of different reasons why when you respond, let's go back to the example of a betrayal, right? You feel betrayed, you feel angry, you feel disappointed. Those are healthy emotions, but they might actually reside in your system for many years to come if they haven't completed that resolution cycle, right? And again, all these factors can influence how off or how quickly resolution happens. So keep that in mind. And so another thing is why insight alone falls short is the body doesn't speak logic. The body has never spoken logic. It is not the language of the body. The intellect is like, oh, yeah, let's try to make sense of this, right? The body's like, logic doesn't work for me. Physiology works for me. Feeling something internally, that works for me, right? The nervous system responds to sensation, not explanation. The nervous system responds to sensation, not explanation. So we can try to explain these things away all day, every day, and the body's still like, well, I'm still feeling this way. And that can feel very defeating, especially if you've talked about the situation over and over again and you still don't feel good, right? So talking about the experience does not necessarily mean that it completes that process and resolves something and you get a sense of resolution around something. So safety must be felt and not reasoned. So remember that the nervous system responds to sensation, not explanation. The body doesn't speak logic. What resolution actually requires, the body must complete what stress interrupted. At some point in your life, when you experienced a unpleasant emotion of some kind and it didn't get fully resolved, it wasn't. So in other words, you feel the emotion, ideally you express the emotion, and then it moves on its merry way. It exits the body and it's no longer a part of the physiology of like feeling triggered, right? There's no longer pressure of that emotion. It's been expressed. It's been released. But when it gets interrupted, it gets stuck and it starts to create pressure and it starts to, interfere with how your body functions physically as well. We talked a lot about that in the last video. So, gentle regulated access of neutralizing the physiological emotional charge of something is a key to resolution. And you don't have to relive or re-traumatize yourself in order to do that. That's that should give you a lot of hope, right? And the nervous system learns that this is over. And it's not an intellectual thing. Again, you're not telling your nervous system, "Hey, nervous system, this is over now. You can relax now." The nervous system needs to experience it. It needs to experience that this is over. It's kind of like, you know, that phrase, actions speak louder than words, right? Like you need to see someone's actions. They might say, "Hey, I'm a really good person. You can trust me," right? And you might want to believe the words, but it's the actions of that person. When you actually experience their character, that's what tells you the truth, right? And so your body is very similar in that it needs to experience this is over. So your mind can, tell your body, "Hey, you can relax. This is over. This happened a long time ago." And the body's like, I need to feel that this is over. The mind thinks, the body feels. So here's an example. Have you ever talked with someone about something and maybe they're rehashing something that happened years ago? Maybe they're telling a story about this bad thing that happened to them, right? And it's super emotionally charged. Like it is so emotionally charged where you hear their story and you look at their affect and their body language and you think to yourself, "Man, it sounds like this happened just yesterday." And it turns out it's a 65-year-old person talking about something that happened in the third grade, right? You're like, wow, that is a lot of emotion with that story. That's an example of the nervous system hasn't got to that place of this is over. The brain may have been talking about that situation over and over and over again. So intellectually, it's like, "Oh yeah, this is over. I've talked about this over and over again. This is over. This is over. This is over." And the body is clearly not over it. And you can see that. Maybe you've experienced this personally. Or like I said, maybe you've witnessed this in another person where you're like, "Wow, that person is definitely not over it." And this isn't about judging or blaming a person or anything like that. It's just noticing that the nervous system needs to feel it. The nervous system needs to feel this is over physiologically. So otherwise, they just continue to relive that. And that is, man, that's what robs your peace. That's what steals your joy. It's something that happened years ago. And it's just like your Groundhog Day. You're waking up and you're reliving that day over and over and over again. That is hijacking your peace. Not good. There's hope. You can reverse that. So this is where healing speeds up. So when the body updates, then the mind follows. When the body experiences sensations differently, a different chemistry, different sensations, different emotions that feel more spacious and, less charge of all the not so great things to feel, then the mind follows, right? Then the body starts to get on the same page as what you intellectually know is true, right? So that emotional charge begins to dissolve. Triggers lose their intensity and maybe their complete power. I've seen this happen many, many times where something is triggering to a person. They actually complete that resolution emotional cycle. And now the same thing that used to trigger them doesn't bother them whatsoever. Why? Because the very thing that was being triggered, it's like poking the bear, right? But when the bear goes away, there's nothing to poke, right? So that's how triggers can lose their intensity when you actually begin to heal that thing at the root. And so the past stops repeating itself in your present. Sometimes you might notice yourself like doing a really great job at coping. So you're like, "Oh yeah, I know these things happened in the past, but in my present, I mean, I'm handling things, I'm successful, I'm holding it down, I have healthy relationships now, blah blah blah," right? And then you go to sleep at night and then you have nightmares or you have bad dreams. That's another way that the body's like, "Hey, there's some unfinished business here. I know you don't want to look at it in your waking life, so I'm going to flash it to you when you're sleeping because you need to process this," right? That's another way that you know that things that have happened in your past have not been fully resolved in your present, despite how well you're functioning in your everyday life, right? That's just another sign that maybe there's something there to heal. So you can remember or talk about things in the past that were at one time very painful, but you no longer re-experience that flood of emotion that you used to. So going back to the example of the 65-year-old person that is sharing a story, and you're like, oh my gosh, this thing happened probably yesterday or last week. And then you find out this is something that happened in the third grade. And you're like, whoa, there's been a lot of time, but that emotion is just as strong, right? Now, take that same person that actually can resolve and actually goes through resolution, changes the physiology of all those triggering emotions. It's like taking a fire extinguisher and just extinguishing the fire of those emotions. They no longer have the possibility or the capability of getting re-triggered again because they are extinguished. Now, when that 65-year-old tells that story again, there's not that strong affect charge. They might be able to share and remember how it felt at that time, but they're no longer reliving it. It's not hijacking their nervous system again and putting a tremendous amount of stress on their mind and their body, and their cortisol levels and their hormones and all the things, right? That is a very powerful thing. So you can remember or talk about things that were deeply painful at one time in your life without it hijacking you again. That's freedom. That is true freedom. So that's the foundation of nervous system based healing. It's subconscious, it's efficient, it's gentle, and there's a physiological shift. These are all the primary foundational components of the Feel Better Fast technique. I'll talk a little bit more about that in future videos. But just to kind of summarize some of the major components of true healing that creates lasting freedom, not just a band-aid. It works on the subconscious level. Remember, the emotions are below the surface. When you think about the iceberg model, the iceberg is what you see above the surface. That's what we intellectualize and what we can see. But below the surface is more of the subconscious, the emotions, right? So a really great solid foundation for nervous system based healing, it gets at the subconscious. It works with the subconscious. It's able to access the subconscious. It's efficient. It's gentle because that's what your nervous system needs to let its guard down in order to heal. And there's a physiological shift. Why physiological? Because that's what emotions are. Emotions are physiological. And 95% of your behavior is driven by your subconscious emotions. Think about that. So 95% of your outcomes in your life, the things that you measure as success, the places that the things that you want to achieve, the goals that you want to obtain, the characteristics that you want to embody, 95% is driven by your subconscious, emotional, including unresolved emotions, right? And it's 5% of your conscious thinking brain. So we use our conscious thinking brain to think about, okay, what is my goal, right? You might write your goals down. You might be working with a life coach or a business coach or something like that, or your therapist or whatever, and talking about your goals. That's only 5% of your outcomes is driven by your conscious thinking brain. That iceberg, what is above the surface, your intellectual rationalization, creating a plan, right? All those things are great, but it's only 5% that's actually going to move the needle in that direction. 95% is driven by the emotions, the subconscious. So if we can, utilize a healing system that accesses 95% of the power, that's tremendous. So, reflection, ask yourself this. Do I know my patterns intellectually, but I still feel them? Another way to describe this is, do I know what my issue is, but I still feel stuck? Do I know why this might happen, but I still self-sabotage? Can you relate to that? Here's another question. Does my body react faster than my mind? Are there times and situations where I react rather than respond? And this is no judgment here. This is how your body and your mind are wired for survival. I talked about that in previous videos as well. But just notice, what are the situations in which your body reacts faster than you can respond, faster than you can think? And have you tried insight, talking about it, writing about it, thinking about it? Have you tried insight, but you still don't have resolution? You're not where you want to feel. You're not feeling the peace and the calm and the spaciousness that you feel like, hey, I've put in all this effort. Where is the return on my effort? I don't feel that this has been resolved, despite all this insight that I have about this topic. You don't need more effort. You need a different pathway. You don't need more effort, more pushing, more energy, more this, more that. You need a different pathway. That's all. It's like, think of two different carpenters. Okay, I'm going to give you an example. Two different carpenters. They have the same goal, right? They're going to build a house. And let's just say they have the same blueprint for they're going to build the exact same house. Okay? So you have carpenter A and carpenter B. Carpenter A, all the tools in their toolbox are power tools, and they are zzz, 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 like they're just going to town building this house so fast, so efficiently, whereas carpenter B has got the old school hammer, right? And he's hammering away, and it takes him forever just to hammer in one nail. Where this guy over here, he's just like got the power tools, and he's just going to town. He's like 1,000 times faster than Carpenter B. They have the same blueprint, the same end goal in mind, the same design, the same details. Everything is the same, but the way that they're going about that end goal is very different. And it's going to change the timeline, and it's going to change the energy. And think about Carpenter B. Carpenter B is just like, this is so daunting. And now he's like smashing his finger accidentally because he's so tired. And like, like you can just imagine how that situation compares to the more efficient system. And so, again, it's not that you need more effort. It's not like you need to hammer those nails in more with that old school hammer and you just need to put in more effort. No, put that hammer down and go get yourself some power tools, right? A more efficient way of getting to your goals and achieving them with a level of ease and comfort. So, just to recap, emotional healing doesn't happen through insight alone. Just having intellectual concept or understanding of it doesn't equal emotional healing, doesn't equal resolution. Stress lives in your nervous system, not just the mind. Stress is not just in the mind, it actually lives in your nervous system. It resides, the physiology of emotions is in your body, all throughout your body. And resolution occurs when the body completes that stress cycle. What stress interrupted, resolution occurs when the body completes that cycle. Where it was interrupted, it goes back and it completes it, right? Physiologically. And so when the body updates, the emotional charge dissolves. It's extinguished. It's not coming back. Pretty cool. So if you notice yourself still feeling triggered by any particular pain of your past, it could be maybe something that someone said to you and it just comes up in your mind randomly, or maybe it rehashes in your mind pervasively throughout the day. You're like, why does this thing bother me still? Or maybe there's something that is heavier and you're like, well, of course that bothers me. And you're just like, but I don't, I want to be more free from that. Whatever level of stress you're experiencing, the heaviness of the emotional stress that you're carrying, try using the pulse point stress tool. It is a fantastic self-help tool that begins to shift the physiology of your emotions, begin to heal you from the inside out. So use that. It's very simple and it's helped so many of my clients. So I encourage you to give that a try. Up next, The next video, I'll be talking about when stress shows up in the body before you even realize it. When stress shows up in the body before you even realize it. I hope this video has been helpful for you and giving you more understanding about how stress works in the mind and the body and how resolution is possible. If you have any questions or comments, please leave it in the comments below, and I look forward to seeing you in the next video.